right, this is going to be episode whatever, the next one of the best Damn League Show period, which self-explanatory, isn't it? If you disagree, just get out of here. Just don't watch. Unusual marketing strategy. Usually you're used to people just pandering to you, saying, oh, tell me what you want and I'll make a show like that. I'm friends with Double Lift and everything. Well, I'm just doing that immediately. Whatever. Yeah, listen, I've got to stop being lazy. I do actually. That's my problem with doing Summer Insight for too many years, Dom. Is I do have like a grab bag of like lazy narratives that are too easy to reach into. I even had one the other day where I was sort of like wrecking Neon from Misfits. I was like, whatever. It's not that impressive. Anyone can just right click champions in a team fight. And I was like, wait a minute, that's just an old reckless narrative. I'm just repurposing just to hate on a new guy. Stop giving him his shine. Like I've really got to step my game up. It's okay. We'll see on this episode if Thorin does indeed step his game up, because obviously the split has ended for LEC Spring 2022, Season 12. We now know, indeed, Rogue did finish first. Fnatic got their shit together, blah, blah. You'll see. We're going to go through them all, right? Here's where I actually want to start, Dom. Logically, the real narrative of the last week wasn't actually like, what order will people finish in? It was really, as you'd expect, who makes the playoffs. Now, I will say, this is the reason I want to start here, is I actually thought I was going to open this episode with a rant about what a nonsense fake storyline that was. Because if you remember, going into the last week, you had basically Mad Lions and SK Gaming or whatever were on like, they had to win all of their games and have the other two teams like lose all their games and, the exact result score the way they wanted, right? So to me, if I'm one of the top teams, like a Vitality, for example, Dom, well, no problem. We're going to win one game and, what's the odds they do that? Like the fact that Vitality for real had to have the last game of the split be what got them into the playoffs. And mate, if that wasn't Astralis sat in those other chairs there, there's a real world where they just don't make the playoffs. Like they looked, you know what I mean? When someone in a tournament's almost like, it's like they're ready to be sent home. Like, dude, Vitality was almost, they just put themselves like right under the gun. Even if they end up winning this split, I think that was a really shocking moment to me, mate, because I actually look at that last game and I just think, mate, you're just so lucky the schedule meant Astralis was your last game. And by the way, spoiler, they got to play their game, if you remember, in the schedule before Mad Lions would have played. Imagine if Mad Lions had played worse first and won and then put even more pressure. Like, dude, there's a real world where Vitality, they snuck through now and no one will care after this because they made the playoffs. But like, I hope people remember that they almost fucked this whole split up.
Yeah, definitely. And they had the first match versus Mad Lions.
Exactly.
They could have won right there. I mean, Mad Lions.
I know.
Mad Lions has been having a terrible split, so there's not really a reason where I feel like you can go into this week thinking that Vitality would not make it. I mean, they have Mad Lions, G2, which is like, I mean, they're okay.
Still winnable.
They're fourth place team.
Still winnable.
So it's like you play an 8th place team or a 7th place team, depending on how you want to view it. A 10th place team, just the worst team in the entire LEC, and a 4th place team, and you only have to win one of those games to get out. And it actually came down to just beating the 10th place team. But even in that game, I mean, it's hard to look at that and be like, oh, well, look, Perks had like a clutch performance. It's like, he better.
I know, come on, exactly.
Like,
listen, when we talk about clutch performances, we're not really talking about you fucked up the whole split, so last game to get in the playoffs versus the worst team in the region. Like, that storyline isn't that cool, is it? Come on, guys. Like, this is the least meaningful clutch performance ever. Like, especially because as well, Astralis logically have nothing to play for. Even G2 that you were talking about, G2 in theory actually is less dangerous because they also did, like, at that point, I don't think their placing was even on the table. I think they already were guaranteed to come like at best third, which doesn't get you out of the position where they pick. So in theory, you're even playing teams that have nothing to play for. These should be like walkover games,
Yeah, I mean, they should have been walkover games, and I just feel like the same way, the same things that we said about Vitality all split, I think were just played true in just this week alone. You don't know what they're drafting. They don't really have an identity at all. When they do have an identity, I mean, it doesn't look like something that suits them well. And we have to see in playoffs what they end up actually doing to make themselves actually a formidable team. Because right now it feels like they are, it's not even that they're jack of all trades, master of none. They're just like not really good at anything.
No, exactly.
That's what it is. And they're not, and it's not like they do a bunch of things like well, but nothing is excellent. They do nothing that well at all. They're just a middle of the pack team. And they've been having the same problems. And I just don't know how to really rate them. I mean, you would assume that coming into playoffs, theoretically, when you look at a super team, right? Like Vitality, and they're playing against XL, they should just beat XL, right? Like, Absolutely. It should just be that they walk over a team like XL. That should not be a team that is impossible for them to beat. But when I'm looking at it, it's like, I don't even know if they're going to beat Excel. I'm kind of worried about that series. I think they might be going home immediately. And I think the bigger question is, if they do end up dropping pretty early in the playoffs, like, do they actually go for a change? Because I feel like this team, I think they've shown that they don't really have the pieces necessary to improve at the things that they're weak on. They remind me a little bit of like 100 Thieves, for example, in NA, where their macro game is like not really exist. I mean, it's a little bit better because Perk's side lanes, but generally this team doesn't know how to like approach setting up vision and taking fights and anything like that. And I'm looking at this roster. I'm like, okay, you have a bunch of skilled players. Like you need a smart player in either jungle or support. You need one guy who's like actually on top of it, that's going to be able to progress the team forward macro wise, or you're just going to end up losing to any team that figures out mid jungle. I mean, even in the game versus Vitality, where Elyoya and Kaiser were playing a little bit better together than normal, can't even play. Game's doomed. I mean, draft is obviously an issue as well, but I mean, they had a lead. They had a position that they could have won this game, and they threw it almost instantly.
That's one thing I want to bring up, because obviously a couple of episodes back we had the discussion about like the Lab Rob self-made scenario, like where the problems are. Like, there's another thing, right? I haven't really seen much actual change in that particular relationship, Dom. It doesn't feel like they've improved. Like, think about this. On paper, they still do have this roster where you have to, give them respect that they could win the game and maybe things could improve. But if you actually look in the server, they don't have a great jungle mid duo. They don't have a great jungle support duo synergy. Like, what do they have? Like, the joke is it really is just like a fucking ranked fives team, innit? Like, it looks like that when they play. Like, it's a bunch of skilled players who, if they get the right champions and they almost like fall into something just working out, they can win the game, certainly. But are they actually like good at early game? Are they good at macro? Do they have great like mid game rotations? Do they like all they essentially can do is win some lanes, and they have like some champions they'll win on? Like, I have a really hard time finding positives, because here's the issue I have for Vitality. As you said, if you project forward to the playoffs, I actually don't think they can pull the angle they're pulling, which goes like this: look, because we've got so many good players, we're going to get it together eventually. It's like, yeah, but that's supposed to also happen at some point in the split, though, boys. Like, it's not supposed to literally only start in the playoffs. Like, the difference is, if Fnatic tells me that, like I saw Fnatic were trying to claim that, they have like seen like improvement with like humanoid. I've actually started to see some in the games, though. Their games do look a little bit better. They do finally look like Razork's active. There's like, I can see at least what they might be claiming. So like, it seems plausible. For Vitality, I actually genuinely think, dude, like, they're just going to come into the playoffs and like, look, I could buy that Perks does a level up or something like that. Like, I don't see why the others would. Like, I don't see why Selfmade and Labrov would some reason play 25% better or suddenly get each other or have. And in fact, on that point you said at the end there, dude, I would take the same point and I would make it explicit. The problem they've done again in roster construction is they've gotten a jungle and a support who are both really mechanically skilled. And that's it. That's their whole fucking selling point. You want one of those guys, maybe, but as you're saying, like, where's the brain? One of them needs to be a brain. We need that in the team, So I think it's a very flawed team, and it just remains flawed, dude. I don't actually know if this team can work. I'll be real. I'll be straight up with you. Like, I'm with you. I suddenly think, and I didn't think this until that last Super Week. And now I'm also thinking, dude, I actually start to feel like I might favour Excel in that series. I'm not even lying. Only by a smidgen, but I might favour them. I feel like I might.
I mean, I could be okay with like a team showing promise, and then like, they find out something like halfway through the split. They're winning a bunch of games on it. Then they try to expand and they drop some games, and it's like, oh well, they don't have to do that stuff. Like, then I can buy the whole idea of like, oh, you're getting it together. The way that they went 9-9, it's like there was no point in the split where I was like, oh, this team is actually good. I mean, they had some like good champion picks at certain times, but I don't think that there's anything gameplay wise that makes me think that this team is going to level up. I mean, essentially the way that I see the series is you're going to have Alfari and Perks, and Alfari and Perks are going to have to just be significantly better players than their opponents in this series for them to move on. Because, I mean, if I'm looking at it right now, Marcoon and Mickey, I'm taking them definitely in the jungle.
As a duo, of course, yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
The only thing I saw that was positive from Labrov, so, I mean, I guess positive is, it's a little bit dramatic, but like the only time that I saw a glimpse of support jungle synergy and the things that I'm looking for was in that game where they were playing Xin Tom Kench, I believe, and it was a Zillion mid. And in this game, they actually both roamed to mid, let Perks get the push out, like helped the mid lane push, and then they transfer that pressure to top and they look for a top play off that. Nothing even came of it because Selfmade ran it down like immediately after. He just died at the blue buff immediately after. But in that game, that was the only point this entire split where I was like, holy shit, they did something support and jungle together. Like that's what we're looking for. Like they played around a lane, they helped the lane shove in, and then they transfer that pressure somewhere else. But the problem is, if you only do it once an entire split, it stops being like this was a planned thing, or was it just luck? Did it just end up being that Perkz was like, hey, like, I'm pushing out, I have no flash, like, can you cover me for this wave? And then people just ended up in his lane, and then Perkz was like, oh, I think I'm gonna go top. Like, was the whole sequence planned out, or was just the moment of like, oh, I need help? Did it just like all fall into place where, you know, they kind of just brainlessly ended up in that situation? So for me, I'm thinking that maybe this team could win one series. If they get Misfits somehow, maybe two. Anything beyond that, I think, is impossible. I don't see this team finishing top 3.
Yeah, I'm with you. They're the only teams they could beat, and let's be real. They beat those teams because they have the roster to potentially just outskill the players. That's it. That's the only reason why. Like, those teams, even those squads are more coherent. The players know their place, etc. Another problem they have in this team is this as well, right? Have you noticed how an angle they don't have for a super team is they don't have a fucking super team's coach? Like, I barely know their coach, the Mephisto guy. I know a little bit about him from, like, sometime when he's in the ERLs or whatever. Like, so the problem there as well is, right, if you at least had some angle of, like, yeah, but, you know, like, the coaching staff knows the team, though, and they've got, like, draft and stuff. Like, dude, logically, I would say they're probably one of the worst. They might be the worst drafting team in the fucking playoffs, mate. Like, they don't know themselves what to draft. Like, it's not even as though. See, there's another area. If you're not very good at drafting because you don't know your own identity, how are you going to make use of those really good players? I don't think you can. So I have to say, like, and it seems mad because part of me still can't look at that roster and go, this team comes 6th place in the playoffs. Somehow that still doesn't make sense in my brain. But, like, I just feel like, it's like you said, I feel like it'd have to be like the fucking series of Alfari's life, or Perkz just has, like, 50 fucking clutch team fights or something. Like, just playing normal League of Legends, this team, there's no way this team's going deep. It's definitely not going beyond 3rd at best. At best.
Yeah, I mean, definitely not going beyond 3rd. I can't see them getting top 2, which is what this team is supposed to do, right? Like, coming into this, it was supposed to be Fnatic 1, Vitality 2, or Vitality 1, Fnatic 2. Like, those are the only acceptable placings when you have teams of this caliber. I mean, Rogue essentially downgraded their roster in most people's eyes. No one thought that by adding Malrong and getting rid of Inspired, who most people thought was the best jungler. I mean, he's literally an MVP of LEC. Han Sama was considered the best player on Rogue by Worlds. And then adding in Comp, who's proven decent, but no one thought he was great. And obviously Malrong is a sub from Dom1. No one thought that was going to make Rogue suddenly a better team. They're like, oh, maybe like they can still end up 3rd. Like, if they're better than the other teams, if the G2 experiment doesn't really work out, maybe they can end up 3rd. If Mad Lions rookies don't shape up, yeah, sure. 3rd is an acceptable place for Rogue, but I mean, I just don't see Rogue losing to Vitality in a best of 5. Like, I can't see that happening right now with how the teams are playing. So I think that's an issue. And then I think we talked about it a little bit last week, but I think the problem with Vitality going forward is going to be that they probably don't like the players that would actually make their team better. Like somebody like a Treats or somebody like an Adviad. That doesn't sound like an upgrade on paper. It's like, oh, Lebrav to Treats, like, but Lebrav is higher rated in solo queue and has better mechanics. It can play all these like aggressive supports and all this stuff. It's like Treats can play the aggressive supports. He can engage team fights. But the thing is, players like Adviad, if you listen to them talk about the game, players like Treats, if you listen to them talk about the game, the way that they see improvement is they're trying to figure out what the best things to do in certain situations are. Whereas like when you see a player like Lebrav, you feel like generally he's trying to like outplay situations or like get winning matchups. Like he cares more about like beating the enemy with his skill rather than beating it with his brain. So I think that they have enough skill on this roster. Those are the two people that I think would actually complement a Vitality roster well. I just don't think that I don't think that the players would want to have either of them. You know, it doesn't seem like the popular name or somebody that deserves to be on a super team. And I guess the coach point you made, I normally feel like if you have a super team like this, you kind of need a super coach. Like he needs to be somebody who's really well respected, that people know as like you need somebody like Yodo, for example, for TL, somebody who has the resume, somebody who's been at the top, who's like been to finals, that's been doing it for a while, that people just trust in immediately in order for all this to work. I just don't think that I don't think a coach like Mephisto I mean, he like we said, we don't know too much about him, but I think it would be really hard for him to like put his players in their places.
Sure.
You know, I think that's going to be a hard thing for somebody like him.
Oh, for sure. I even say the reason also why I find this split so underwhelming from Vitality is because coming into the year, other people, I mean, to be fair, I would agree, would have put one of the big criteria as like Perks has to sort of like shape his game up from what it was last year in Cloud9. Spoiler, he did, fans. Like if you're watching him, you're an LCS fan, you don't watch LEC much. If you watch this year, you'd see the guy that basically was sent across the Atlantic to Cloud9. Like he's actually really good again. Like he's even got like a polished game. He doesn't even just randomly int anymore. Like that actually doesn't happen very often now. Like I actually thought, in the context that his team's sort of been a bit of a fucking train wreck, Bucks had a very good split.
Yeah, I think he had a pretty good split. Definitely better than his summer. He's just laning a lot better now. It just looks like his laning is way better than it used to be. Whereas before, I felt like that was kind of the sketchy thing on Cloud9 is it didn't feel like he had it completely down. It still looked like he was getting used to playing mid again from playing AD carry for 3 out of the last 4 splits before this.
It didn't even look like he picked for lane dude in Cloud9. It looked like he knew, like, I'll probably be down in lane, so I'll pick like TF or something so I can make plays. It was always like that shit, wasn't it? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely don't think he's like one of the best 3 mids in LEC right now. Like, if I was going to go best 3, I would say Humanoid, Vetio, Larson definitely had a better split overall. But I definitely think that Perks was like pretty good, and if he didn't play well in the majority of the games, this team is not making playoffs. I don't see any reason why this team would make playoffs if Perks and Alfari played under their individual levels this split.
I'm with you on the Vethiol Larson one, but the only thing is, though, I think like Humanoid, I think that's debatable, because to me, Humanoid, like, he got better towards the end of the split for my money, whereas Perks was like fairly consistent throughout most of it, you know?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think Humanoid is actually back in form. I mean, I think his last few weeks were really good. Overall.
Yeah. That's why Fnatic looks really good now. We can transition them and talk about next if you want.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm down to talk about
because there's one thing, by the way, that whole topic of like the idea of like, you know, what did Humanoid do in Mad Lions? I think we're finally seeing it. Like, I actually finally in some of these last couple of weeks of Fnatic feel like I'm starting to see the Mad Lions Humanoid properly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. I mean, he's definitely stepped it up. Razor stepped it up, and I mean, now you can see why, like, even though they dropped that game to Misfits, it really didn't bother me that much. To be honest, I still think that they were the better team overall. It's just like one of those things where, in the playoffs, like, how often are you going to give Neon Jinx? How often are you going to give Schlatt and Lee Sin in the playoffs?
And these are easy drafts to just ban someone if you know they can play it like that, exactly.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that you want to just consider in draft until they show that they can do other things. Exactly. And it's not even that Neon might be worse on other champions besides for Jinx. It's actually just that Jinx is such a ridiculous champion.
Of course.
It's such a broken champion right now that even if he's good at everything, just take him off the thing that could potentially 1v9 the entire game, because other AD carries don't function like that. If you're playing Ezreal, if you're playing Kai'Sa, if you're playing Xayah, if you're playing Aphelios, you're not going to completely take over off one kill, and you can't snowball from behind as well as Jinx. It's why almost every one of these epic comebacks that you see where people are sitting in the base and they're getting a pentakill, whatever. Saw one of these in LPL recently. I experienced one myself when I was a player. They always have Jinx in them because that's the only carry that can be like 3-4 items, and one kill could turn into like, oh, you're acing the whole team.
Yes.
Normally, other AD carries, okay, they can play a team fight well, they can get a kill, but they don't have the chase power of Jinx. They don't have like the get excited passive, start running through the team and killing everyone. So for me, I don't really care about the Misfits loss for Fnatic. I feel like they were better most of the game. I think that the pauses were lame as always. I know it's weird to say that for Fnatic because obviously like they were the Fnatic pause
for them. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. But either way, like I think that whenever you're super far ahead and there's a pause, like it kind of stalls out your pacing for the game. So I mean, I think they played that game well. It seems like they have early game plans. Like Hilly just looks like he can play any champion in the game. He's just going to be a fucking beast. If it's Renata, which he started playing this week, all right, sure. He's just probably one of the best Renatas in LEC. I mean, I think that Fnatic is a strong front runner to win. I don't really see how with this lineup, with these players playing this well, how they're going to lose a best of 5 to any other teams in LEC. Razork is the person that I think was a question mark for like the first 5 weeks. I feel like he's really gotten better. Like he looks so much more confident. It looks like he's so much more decisive about what he wants to do in the game. And this is what we've been waiting for all split. You can tell a jungler's mentality when you see them fight or when you see them make plays. Like, are they showing up to a lane because they're called there and they don't really know what to do, or do they like want to fight? Are they looking to dive? Do they have a plan around lanes? And I'm starting to see that intention from Razork that we didn't see earlier this split. So I'm really happy with how Fnatic's looking. I think that they look like they're peaking at the right time. I really think it's their one to lose.
No, I'm with you, because the good thing I think for me about Fnatic is you saw even in the first 4 to 5 games of the split, like they could put themselves in position to lose games, but the flaw of the team due to the players they have and the fact that in the case of their bot lane, they already have played together a year. Realistically, there actually aren't many teams can actually just like catch the throw, even if fucking Fnatic throws to them. And that was when they were bad. Like, they've already gotten better and better, I'd say from like the midpoint onwards. They look like they've ramped up as they come to playoffs, and they're looking their absolute best, as you're saying, in these last like week or two. And every player's finally getting his shit together. So yeah, to me, like, here's the thing. I still think obviously it'll be fascinating if they play against Rogue in a best of, because we all want to see that matchup. It's probably going to be the final and maybe even an upper bracket match. So I certainly think Rogue has the potential to do it, but I'm sort of with you. Like, the difference is the floor in a game for Fnatic is really high, and then the ceiling, now that we've actually seen it, is really legit. So like, I feel like if you combine it, they've got everything going for them pretty much.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I agree with all that.
I've got a question for the Orcs. I had a point that I made on the show I do with Rich Side Select, but this is a point that I feel has gone mad under the fucking radar, mate. Right? You know, when everyone was making that shit on Reddit where they were tracking the fact that going into the last week, Upset had like 8 deaths in the whole split, and then the record ever is like Reckless with I think like 11 or 13 or something. I can't remember what the record was, but he was going basically for like least deaths ever in a split. Well, here's what I thought of the other day. This is actually a mad point, because it shows you how inherently in the LCS, LEC, there is actually a bias towards Reckless. Here's how you know. Because the joke is, Upset just did an even better Reckless impression than Reckless can do. He basically out-Recklessed Reckless, and what's the conclusion? When Reckless does that, Dom, they give him the MVP. When Upset does it, everyone's trying to give Hylissang the MVP. Now listen, I don't have a problem with that, in the sense that I actually did think there was times where if you were going to give it to a Fnatic player a couple of years ago, it should have been Hylissang instead of Reckless. I actually thought overall Hylissang was like, you know, the engine to the team, and was the person who essentially opened the fucking map for them half the time. But where's this consistency? Like, everyone in some ways is almost like downgrading what Upset's done. Like, listen, I get it, because I am the originator of not liking that style of AD carry. As in, it's just not sexy, it's just boring, innit? It's just people playing safe, playing like, and also, spoiler, just as with Reckless, it only works when you have amazing players in every other role, by the way. Otherwise, you have to, at some point in time, get some fucking action going. So, like, I don't have any problem at all with Upset playing that way. I'm just saying, it's a bit of a fucking blind spot that people are sort of almost like trashing on him for it, but like, essentially in his team, I think he's played exactly the way his team needed. Well, what's he done wrong, boys? He's not Uzi. He's not going to 1v9 the games. He shouldn't in this team. It'd be stupid to try that style.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's been making many mistakes. I feel like he's outputting like good damage when he actually needs to output damage. Yeah. I would like to know what his like damage per minute and like those types of stats are based on how he's playing, because he doesn't have like the most kills in the league. I think that's one of the criticisms that people have had of him, is they're like, oh, but like when Reckless had the lowest deaths, he also had like insane amounts of kills.
Yeah. Sometimes the most. Yeah, true.
Yeah, sometimes the most in the entire league. But I mean, I would just like to see like how much damage he's actually doing, because I care way more about that than kills. Like, kills are whatever. Like, are you last hitting them? Like, I mean, the champions that he's playing, I mean, he played like 3 games of Jhin. He played 3 games of Jhin. He played a bunch of Aphelios instead of Jinx. So like, other people are playing the Jinx side.
Yeah. He didn't abuse it.
Yeah. One of the strengths of Fnatic is that they were more comfortable, or they were comfortable playing the Aphelios side. So they'll play the Aphelios into the Jinx and just be okay with that trade. Or they'll have Jinx banned and they'll just play Aphelios. They're not banking their strategies on only playing Jinx, which is obviously going to super inflate your kill score because of obviously how Jinx functions in a team fight. Jinx is the type of champion, you kill one, you kill them all. So, I mean, when I'm watching Upset, I don't really see how people rationalize that he's not the best AD carry. I know that that's a take that I've seen. I've been seeing takes like, oh, Neon's the best AD carry because Neon plays to win, whereas
because of the recency bias of those couple of games. Come on, boys, how are we doing that?
Yeah,
like, he's good, but he's not the best. Come on, the best.
Yeah, I could go as far as...
Isn't that what I just said earlier? The point is, Neon has to do that. If he actually tried to play like Upset Reckless do, he'd just lose the game, wouldn't he? He wouldn't get to the team fight to win it.
I mean, it's just when I look at Neon and Upset play, I just feel like Upset is better. I don't know. Like, I think his
I
character
agree.
control, it just looks like his ability to read the team fight instantly and like
Oh, it
understand
looks
what
mega
he should
polished,
do.
yeah.
He looks really fucking polished. So to me, I just don't know what people are looking at when they're saying that Neon is better than him because Neon has more kills or like Neon played more, or is it because Misfits just beat Fnatic? Is that what it is?
Probably.
Misfits beat Fnatic. So I
Probably
guess
a bit of
means
that, right?
that Neon is better. I don't know. For me, I feel like Upset was clearly the best AD carry in the league. I think Hilly was the best support in the league. I don't really think either of these are really questions, but I wouldn't give either of them MVP, even though I think those players are probably the two best players in the entire league. If I'm going MVP, it just has to be Vetio. Like we said it on other shows. I still have the same opinion. Think about this. Misfits had one more loss than Fnatic. Fnatic only had one less loss than Misfits. How many fucking times did Vetio carry this team from like unwinnable situations? Like,
absolutely.
This guy definitely deserves the MVP. I mean, that's the bad thing about playing on a super team. If you're playing on a super team, unless your team is like 18-0 dominating the fucking split, you probably don't get an MVP on one of those rosters. How can you be the most valuable when there's so much value? Like the way I consider it is like, out of your team's like value, what percentage of that is coming from a player? That's how I'm viewing the most valuable player.
Yeah.
If the whole team is predicated on your success and you do that and you're able to carry the team, I mean, it has to just be a Vetio MVP for me. I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, for me, like, look, I normally am someone who says, like, it's very rare there should be, like, a pure consensus, like, because essentially, in cases like this, like picking MVP, we are also going on, like, personal preference, you know, like the discussion we just had about ADCs. People can understand from that discussion why back in the day I preferred Forgiven over Reckless. It's obviously, it's not to do with who is playing better for their team, because actually, spoiler, they were both playing correct for their teams, if you look at who they used to play with, and they had their teams built around them in different ways. But the point is, it depends on what style you prefer. So my issue is this, right? Normally, I would say you have to open it up. You have to put in, like, obviously, Larson, Hillis, all the names go in. The problem is this, Dom, is I actually think Vetio has one of the most ironclad MVP cases I've ever seen in a Western region. And the reason why is this, right? I'm personally not a huge fan of what's called the wins over replacement method, which is kind of what you were alluding to there, which basically what people do is they say, well, if I took Upset out of Fnatic and I put, like, let's say Neon. Let's say I put Neon instead of Upset, right? Would Fnatic still win most of their games? Yeah, probably most. They'd probably still at least win 80% of them, right? They'd probably still be a top team. It might not be that much different. Whereas obviously it goes without saying, if I take out fucking Vetio and pick whoever you think's a mid-table, like Nuke Dog. If I put Nuke Dog instead of Vetio, they probably win half as many games, right? If you do that approach, generally, I think like there is a logic to that, but I personally think at the end of the day, it is like the most valuable player. Or you also have to use your eye test. Like that can only work in a sense. You have to also in the game see the amazing performances. That's where Vetio's nailed it, dude. Because not only in the game does his eye test check out like a motherfucker, with no exaggeration, almost every single game this split, he was the best player on Misfits, if not in the whole server, no matter who they were playing. And then as you just said, here's the difference. If his team just crept into playoffs, but he was the only reason, I might be able to say, like, yeah, but you know, like, blah, blah, blah. Someone else didn't have to do that because their team's good. The difference is, as you say, they won one less game than Fnatic. And yet this guy, we know, did basically almost everything in all the games. So, like, in that case, that's the most extreme example of one man, just by every metric, hard carrying I think I've seen in years and years and years. Because as you say, like, if you think of past years, even when, like, Cap's hard carried, yeah, but he hard carried on an amazing team. Like, that was impressive because he was on an amazing team. But this guy, like, if people don't get it, here's the best way to say it. I think it is almost impossible what this guy has done this split, as in to win 12 games. Like, the idea you could win 12 games with the teammates he has, I think it's mental, mate. Because I think you've even seen it in the game. You can't ban this guy out. People have tried. People have tried adapting, like, right, well, it's just these champions, like, you know, like, obviously last year, like, if it's just as a Carly, like, this year there'll be some shit, it's just, get that. It doesn't matter, mate. The guy has the widest champion pool. Doesn't matter what you put him on. Like, as you said about the Neon example, I'm with you, by the way. If I was playing against Neon in a best of 5, I'd be very, very cynical and go, sorry, mate, in your team, there's only you and Vetio, so I'm banning Jinx every game against you. You find an answer for that. If you do, maybe I open it up again, but until you do, no Jinx for you. The difference of Vetio is there's no champion he can do that with. This guy's just busted.
Oh, I mean, look at this. I have right now the amount of champions he played. He played 11 unique champions. He played Silas, Yasuo, LeBlanc, Victor, Akali, Syndra, Cassio, Zoe, Orianna, Ryze, Corki. the most games he had on a champion was 3 on Silas, and then everything else is
That's
either
wild.
2 or 1. Like, he's playing every champion in the game. He had one of the highest amounts of kills ever. He almost hit the 100 kill mark, which has only been done like 4 or 5 times in the history of LEC. So it's like, come on, man. Like this, what else could this guy do? I mean, he's literally smurfing in the LEC. And like the thing that's so crazy is when you look at Misfits, where would you rank Mersa and where would you rank Herit in terms of overall strength? Like, I would say Neon, honestly, like, his performance was really good towards the end there.
Yeah.
I could go as high as seeing him being second. I could never put him above Upset.
No.
I think that there's an argument you can make for better than anyone outside of Upset. You could put him second. I think you might be able to put Neon second right now. Where would you put Herit? Herit had a fucking bad split.
I would no joke.
He
would be like 7th or 8th for me or something, dude. Like, it'd be pretty low down, I'm pretty sure.
I'm 100% with you. It would be 7th or 8th over there. Where would Mersa go? Similar spot.
Maybe 10th or 9th, I think. It'd be pretty low down, I have to say.
Yeah, and Schlatten is like good on...
He maybe got better towards the end of the split, I thought. You know, he's starting to get his shit together towards the end, I thought.
Yeah.
Still not a monster, though. Still no monster, for sure.
I mean, look, he played 8 games of Lee Sin. This guy played 8 games of Lee Sin. He looked like a completely different player when he's playing Xin Zhao.
Yes. Yeah, that's true.
So, like, 13 of his games are on Lee Sin and Xin Zhao. I think that in playoffs... So we can go into... I mean, we're talking about Misfits right now, so we can go into my next take, which I don't think that Misfits is going to win one series in playoffs. I think they will not win a series. I think they'll lose the first series. I think they'll lose the second series. They'll be out. That's it. I don't think...
it is worth saying, just for context for people who don't think this through. Remember, depending on where you are in the playoffs, winning a series isn't always the goal. As in, if obviously Vitality beats XL, they'll technically have won a series, but they could just go out in the very next match. Whereas obviously the problem Misfits have is, because they're third in the league, they are going to basically probably only play really good teams at this point, right? So I agree. It's plausible. Yeah, there's a world where that happens, Dom. Because the real issue is this, right? If you look at this team, in one game they can be good. This team can't do it. Like, as a team, they can't be good 3 games in a row. And the best of 5, you might have to play 5 games. Like, I agree with you. I don't know. If you look at the top teams they're going to play, so realistically, they're going to play, like, probably Fnatic, and then after that, who knows?
They play Rogue. They play Rogue first round.
Right, there you go. So they play Rogue first. If you lose that, they would then be, like, the team that's playing in the third, fourth match, right?
So the way it would work is if they lose, so most likely scenario is that they lose and G2 loses.
Yes.
Right. So XL versus Vitality play each other. Whoever wins moves on.
And plays G2, right?
They will play G2
yes.
if G2 loses to Fnatic because G2 is the lower seed. So then G2 will play against XL or Vitality. I think G2 is probably going to win versus either of those teams, right? Then you have G2 playing against Vitality in that match. I think that they're going to lose that. So I think that, I mean, Vitality, I just don't see them winning a series. I think that it's such a massive overperformance if they're able to win one series. I think that most likely they're just going to go 0-2 out of playoffs. And I think that it's really telling when you see the fact that they finished over G2 and Rogue didn't even think twice. And Rogue has looked really good against G2. So, like, matchup-wise, you'd think that Rogue would be really willing to play against G2. They pretty much shit-stomped them both of the games they played them this split. And even though G2 is a lower seed and they look good against G2, they still pick Misfits.
Yeah, that was actually something that was weird in itself. I mean, obviously people will say some of the Rogue players historically always did bad against G2, but I also thought that was whack, dude. But I get it. Like, I get the angle as to why, because essentially what you're implying is Rogue just thinks Misfits can't win. And by the way, as you just said, I'm inclined to agree, because the problem here as well as this, here's another thing that unfortunately is a bit of a dampener, because it's going to be the only reason people want to watch Misfits. Here's the dampener, boys. It's too much to expect that Vithio actually does this in the playoffs in a whole series, because at the end of the day, like I just said, I actually think what he did individually this split is almost impossible. Like, I've seen very few players ever have a team this bad, this discoordinated, this like fresh in terms of some of the rookies, but this good game to game to game. In the playoffs, I wouldn't blame this guy if he has like a bad game, finally, or he just has a game where, you know, the pressure's big and he just plays okay and then they lose the game. That can happen. It's not unreasonable. That's easy to happen, in fact. Let's be real. It's harder to play in the playoffs.
Yeah, and also people's mentality around Misfits is going to be like very decisive in this series. Like, I think Rogue is going to go into the series. They're going to have Larson playing his control mages, and they're going to be like, yeah, just don't die to him. Like, Larson can play to not die in a mage versus mage matchup. You can't, like, you have to have threats other places on the map. if Hirit is still running it down, if Hirit doesn't step up, he's still running it down. Leeson is banned. Schlatten is just not as good because of that. Mersa is still like, I mean, he's a rookie. Like, I have nothing against Mersa. I know that we often.
No, I agree as well. Yeah, he's just fresh. That's all.
He's fresh. I mean, I don't think that there's anything. He's not like somebody who I want replaced or anything. No. Like, but he's just not one of the best supports in the league right now. That's factual. If he doesn't step it up, Hirit doesn't step it up, how easy is it going to be for Larson to just take his hands up? Oh, I'm just not going to do anything. Oh, I'm just farming. Vetio's going to be farming. Larson's going to be farming. Rest of the map is on fucking fire. Game is lost.
And they've got comp to match him in the team fights anyway, so I agree. I don't see where the edge can be for Misfits. It can't even be the Vethio. I mean, let's be real. Even Vethio, to some degree, his match, they've got one of the other MVP candidates from fucking mid lane playing in his lane. Like, I agree, mate. Like, if you look at the Rogue is almost a team designed to beat Misfits. Like, at the end of the day, Hirit not only hasn't been good, but like, good luck fucking smashing Odoam mid lane. The guy's made his whole career off just being surviving in fucking playoff series in top lane. And then, as you say, like, Jungle goes over at the moment, probably goes over to the side of fucking Rogue. Like, what edge do you have if you Misfits? So I have to say as well, like, it sounds sad because like, put it this way, here's the real problem I have. I almost have like a feeling that what I predicted is actually what's going to happen as well. That you'll just find that the Vethio can't be a superhero and carry all the games. He'll just have like one or two that are bad, or they'll be down 0-2 and they'll just give up a game easily or some garbage like that, you know. Unfortunately, I feel like the success for them was the placing of the regular split like that. No one expected that. I don't think they can translate that though, because this is the problem, right? I mean, obviously Rogue had this for many years. Winning best of ones against a different opponent in every game is very different from playing 5 games potentially in a row against one opponent. It's such a different skill set. Like, you have to reset the filters as to what makes you a good team. How do you win? What's your identity? What are you going to do to adapt? Like, there's just so many questions for Misfits. I don't think they have any answers, to be fair. They just have Vethio. So all hail Vethio.
They can't have answers unless Hirit steps it up. Like, Hirit is going to have to start playing like he did last split, where he's just not dying so much randomly in lane. Like, this guy, he's dead so often, man. Like, this guy is just running it down so often this split. And I think that the other thing that happens is teams, like, they're going to have a week to prep for both of the Misfits matches. Like, both Misfits opponents have a full week to prep for them.
That's true.
Because they're not going to be in one of those situations where, like, if they're in the upper bracket, they're only playing one game that week. Next week, they are one best of 5 that week. Next week, they have their next best of 5. So a team is going to have all their focus on them. Whereas up until this point, the prep will be on like 2 teams in a week. And Misfits is normally not the team that you're going to be like hard fucking prepping for. Like, it's like, oh shit, we're playing against Fnatic this week. Oh, we're playing against Rogue this week. We're playing against G2 this week. It's very rare that Misfits was the focal point of a team's week where it's like, okay, we got to make sure that we neuter them, which is part of the reason why I think Neon got so many games of Jinx, is because people weren't really honing in on like, how are we going to beat Misfits? Like, what do we need to do to beat Misfits? So, I mean, I think we pretty much went over this enough now, but I just think that it's really, really hard for a team to prep for Misfits for a week that's the caliber of Rogue or even G2 or Fnatic and lose to them. I don't see how.
I'll also just chuck in there that obviously the main feather in the cap for Misfits is the placing. Like, wow, we were 3rd and we were 1 game behind Fnatic and 2 behind Rogue. Yeah, you also had 2 of the most egregious throws seen in fucking years happen in this split. Like, if we took those wins off them, which, listen, might sound unfair, but remember, for Vitality and Fnatic, I'm pointing out when they throw games or they almost throw games that they still win. Mm-hmm. So if you take those wins off them and realistically Misfits becomes like the 5th team, the 4th, that's more where the team actually is, basically in line with what we're saying. The real problem Misfits have is this. In a mad world, they actually might, if they wanted to do something in the playoffs, have been better off coming 5th or 6th and playing the first game, and they could have had 1 series they might have been able to win and sort of like build some fucking story off. Whereas, yeah, as I said, the problem is they're not going to get to play the last place team, probably.
Yep. They're not going to play probably the last 2 place teams. They're just going to end up, I mean, unless Fnatic lose to G2 or, one of these bottom tier team or the bottom teams in playoffs, the 5th, 6th seeds, ends up beating G2 in that 4th, 5th place match. I mean, they're just getting 4th. Like, Misfits is just getting 4th, which is what Rogue thinks they are. Rogue thinks they're the 4th team. Rogue chose them for a reason. So
yes.
Yeah, there we go.
And I would trust them since they're the team that supposedly like has all the fucking scrims on lock and knows all that shit. So yeah. Right, okay, what about the aforementioned G2 then? Because that's obviously the top 4 team that we haven't discussed yet. Right, here's the only thing I have with this team is every time I think they're not that good, they do actually have like a good win where I'm like, no, maybe I have to give them more credit than that. They are a better team than I expect. My problem still, Dom, I can't get off this, unfortunately, is this is the team where of all the top 4 teams, I mean, Misfits aside, obviously, unlike Rogue, unlike Fnatic, I can't say Vitality because I've never really seen a really coherent Vitality, but unlike Rogue and Fnatic, I've never seen a really impressive ceiling to this team yet, still.
Yeah.
Like, I've even thought over the last few weeks, since obviously you always big him up, I've even thought, even Broken Willard's had a couple of dodgy games these last few weeks, mate. He's had a couple that looked a couple of screamers.
I can't remember. Let me look at
Before that, I was with your take. I did think for like the first 3/4 of the split or 4/5 or whatever, he was pretty much one of the most consistent players on the team. Was generally doing well. He's had a couple that looked like he showed a little bit of weakness, I thought.
I mean, I guess it depends on how far back you're going. I think that this game, the final game against Rogue, I think that was a questionable game. But before that, you had the Trinimir game.
Like, shouldn't he basically have been heavily ahead in that lane against Odoam there?
So he should have, and then he made a decision. So it wasn't so much about skill; it was just like a decision, which I guess you could factor into skill. But like he almost killed Odo. He should have got a solo kill. He actually fucked
Yeah,
solo
you
kill.
almost had him right.
He should have flash autoed instead of flash Q. If he was going to go for that solo kill, or he should have just not flashed and taken the other guy's flash. He could have gained more off that. And then once he got the push in, he saved his TP instead of TPing back. So he was kind of like playing more for like, oh, maybe I'm going to have to TP somewhere on the map, instead of what he probably should have done, which is just TPing back to lane and continuing to have that pressure. So he let himself off the hook. I think that game was also a weird one because they failed the level 1 invade. That was when they tried to level 1 invade topside. Jankos died. Suddenly Jankos was super far behind. I mean, Hecarim versus Xin, if Hecarim gets early kills, it's just massively Hecarim favored.
Sure.
So I kind of didn't view that game as, I mean, I guess the whole team looked kind of bad, but I didn't really view that game as, oh shit, like this team is underperforming or this team is playing terrible. I just think that they were too obvious in what their plan was. They did something earlier in the week. They did the same thing the game before versus Vitality, where they were playing same jungle matchup, Zen versus Hecarim. They did the level 1 invade topside, then they just ran it back, and this time Tribute was just sitting there at 1 minute 40 seconds. The support is topside. The wave is crashing bot, and the support is literally sitting in a fucking bush topside, or like sitting behind a wall topside, ready to capitalize on the late invade. So they really got read like a book in this game. But I don't think that took away from my impression of BB. And then if you look at his last 4 games before that, he had the Trinimir game where he shit all over Alfari. Right?
That's true.
Like, he had that game. Then he had the 2 Auction games where he did really well. One versus Adam, where he was super far ahead. The other one versus Finn, where he was super far ahead again. And the game before that was the Trinimir game where he solo killed here 3 times in lane, and then that was the infamous throw. That was the G2 versus Misfits throw. So when I look at their overall games, I still feel like he was, I mean, one of the best. He's definitely a top 3 top laner in LEC in my mind over the course of the whole split.
Yeah, of course.
So I don't think that he fell off personally. Like, I think that he played pretty well.
No, I'm just saying I saw some weakness. I saw a couple of games that looked a little bit more questionable,
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, when I look at G2, my biggest issue is that they don't know how to close out games. They don't know how to win games. They always look sketchy in like the mid to late game. They always look like they're unsure of what to do around a Baron, or like they don't know if they want to contest the soul, or they're splitting and TPing at a time where the other team isn't ready for the TP. It never feels like they just control their victories and like just win a game flat out. The same way Fnatic does, for example, when they're ahead. Same way Rogue does when Rogue is ahead. Like, if you look at how Rogue closed out the game against them, that 26-minute win, that was clean as fuck. Like, they were ahead, did everything right, closed the game out. They pretty much they were winning from when they countered the level 1 invade pretty much until the end of the game. There's small hiccups, but like for a Western team, I think that this is like one of the cleanest games you're gonna get right now in spring. So I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that polish that Fnatic and Rogue have, and I think that that's really scary, because if you're playing a best of 5 as G2, you can't afford to throw one of your wins, because you're not going to win enough early games. You're not going to get ahead in enough games in a best of 5. Generally, I mean, this is obviously it is possible to just shit on a team early game every single game, but you're generally not going to get ahead enough in a best of 5 to withstand throwing games versus a team that's arguably better than you. You're going to have to know how to
Rogue
win your
taught
wins.
us. Yeah, exactly as Rogue taught us. Like, the joke was they had to just get so far ahead that it was impossible to throw last year, right? That was their whole fucking storyline. And guess what? That does not work in the playoffs. Anyone who's seen playoff League of Legends knows historically the opposite trend is better. It's actually better in the playoffs to be the team that's slightly weaker in the early game, but just knows how to scale and close the game out. Like, you will just win more series. This is one factor, though, that I actually think, this is one of the reasons I sort of, maybe I'm starting to come towards players where, you know, like, for example, Alfari was like bigging up G2 as well. I think Fnatic and G2 were the ones he was like bigging up. Here's one factor I do think is underrated for G2 going into the playoffs. I was saying this on my other show as well. One of the ways that it's so interesting, right, is people have gotten so used to that meme to shit on Jankos and act that he's the reason you lose, that, like, the joke is people almost haven't noticed, dude, this guy had like a sleeper, like, pretty good split. Like, he had like
really good split.
Yeah, like, he wasn't ever bad in the team pretty much. He almost never like fucking cost him the game. Yeah, listen, he wasn't going to be like the MVP of the league, but like, he was just consistently, like, again, the floor for this guy is really legit. And let's be real, you think of some of the people in the playoffs, right? Razork's barely ever played playoff League of Legends. Obviously, goes out saying Zlatan's played fuck all, and then it's not like Malrang's played in Europe. So, dude, like, low key, Jankos he's going to get better in the playoffs of anything. This guy's a mega veteran. I actually think that factor really plays in G2's favor.
Yeah, I mean, I did a little thought exercise where I was trying to rank Jankos, and I came to the conclusion he was just the best jungler this split.
I think that's fair. Yeah, because remember, Malrang did have like amazing teammates. Razork shouldn't even be in the convo, I'm afraid. I'm sorry. And then you look at the other Synchron's on the worst thing. Like, I think you're right. On paper, he might actually, in isolation, you know, not looking at the wins, just in isolation as a player, he might be the best jungler. He looked like mega polished and controlled all round game. Yeah.
And there's things that the thing that about Jankos is, if you want to know what classic Jankos looks like, go watch the Vitality versus G2 game again and look at Selfmade just sitting there farming. And just think about what Jankos is doing with his time. Sure, to the untrained eye, they're just even in farm. Like, oh, both junglers are just doing whatever. Jankos late invades, right? He puts the enemy jungler behind. Then his bot lane needs a push out. His bot lane is not actually playing well in this game. His bot lane actually kind of fucked up their lane. He goes bot lane. He's there for the bot lane to push out. Then he runs back top, and he's back top, and he's getting the top lane ahead again. Like, he did so much. And not only what was this happening, like, after the top invade, before he even got bot, he actually pressured Alfari, forced Alfari to actually take like a trade that he didn't want to take, like just a melee auto trade versus Tryndamere, and he released pressure from topside. So he's like releasing pressure all over the map. He's doing so much to just stop the buildup that's happening from laners misplaying.
And there's the same farm, like you say. Still gets the farm anywhere.
Yeah, and he's still the same farm. So he's actually performing so well in most of these games. I mean, unfortunately, this last game versus Rogue, I mean, he just got so far behind from the level 1 invade. Like, it was a bad idea to do the same cheese that he did on Selfmade to Malrang. He should have found another angle in that game.
I mean, the logic was, though, right, if it worked, you also then put Malrang in such a bad position, he's probably fucked for the game, right? So it was kind of like a worth the gamble, maybe.
I mean, so, like, the thing is, it's such a naturally good play, because the way you see it is like, okay, we have Tryndamere level 1, we have Xin level 1, we have Akshan level 1, we have Xin level 1. And the other one, it was Tryndamere, we have Xin level 1. You have these champions that just win the 2v2. So, like, that's just a play where if no one else comes, which normally the mid laner can't come, he'll lose too much experience mid. And the support being top is something you don't really think about. You're like, why would the support be top at this time? Like, the support might be top early, drop a ward or something, but he's not going to be sitting there waiting for us at 130. He has to be in lane. Now, I don't even know if his bot lane actually messed that up. I would have to, like, look at the pro view of bot lane and see, did they zone properly? Because in that game versus Rogue, Comp lost nothing off of it. Like, he played the lane, he was just completely chilling. Somehow he's still winning bot, even though his support used both summoners, used flash and ignite, and was top for the first like minute of the game. So in this situation, like, I can't really fault Jankos too much, because it's something that you don't expect if you're looking at the game from a normal viewpoint. It's something that's good. Like, if you play a solo queue game, this is what you do. This is a good way to try to get a lead. It's just that when a team has that prep, when a team's willing to sacrifice like that, then it becomes less good. And honestly, the result might actually be okay if the bot lane is able to exploit that lead. Like, having no summoners on your Galio bot lane should be something. Like, it shouldn't be just that your support roams top, uses both summoners, and is there for a minute, and bot lane is chilling. That should not be. It shouldn't just be like, oh, that doesn't matter. Like,
you make a play off it, right? Yeah, you figure something out.
Well, I mean, you zone them off CS. You're able to just win a trade straight up. They were losing trades. How are they losing trades when they're the ones with the advantage in summoners. Like, what the fuck is happening? So, to me, the result might not even be that, like, you should not go for that invade there. The result might be that the bot lane actually just needs to run away with the game because of that. They just need to dick the enemy bot lane into the floor, knowing that they just don't have the resources. They expended all their resources to fuck over the jungler. And yeah, I mean, then Jankos is just super far behind, and the bot lane is not ahead. So I don't even hate that. So overall, my point is that Jankos is doing so much of split. I think it was another fucking insane split from him.
Great.
Overall, his lanes didn't even play super fucking well. There was games where Cap scented. Those games were Flocked and Targama scented. BB inted every now and then. He was probably the strongest like laner on the team in terms of just like 1v1, 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 2v2, all that stuff. That being said, like, without a jungler like Jankos that's reading the map like this, team doesn't function. If you put Selfmade on that team, nothing's happening.
No,
teams maybe not making playoffs.
And also, as much as it might hurt people's feelings, fuck do I care, mate? Do something about it. All I'll say is this: if Jankos was on Vitality, mate, that'd be a whole different fucking story right there. By the way, that move alone, there's the player that fucking completes your team and makes everything work beyond that. This is why he will, no joke, partly because he's memed on himself and partly because he's the jungler. The jungler always gets blamed. Low key, this guy is one of the greatest players to ever play from any fucking region, but he'll never get his full flowers, I've noticed. Like, he's always going to get somehow, he's always going to get memed on, or people just, I mean, the other part as well, I will say, is it's obviously harder to see when the jungler's doing brilliant stuff. Like you just said earlier, like, you can't always tell. Well, what did he do? Look, the scar is the same on the scoreboard. Yeah, but look at what he did on. So basically, how Dom just explained, he essentially got 2 of his fucking lanes ahead and then farmed his jungle. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
He's a fucking miracle worker.
Sometimes it's not even getting ahead. Sometimes it's just keeping them from dying, keeping them from being fucked. Like, he's reading the lane. Like, he looks at the lane and he knows, like, oh shit, I need to be there for you to crash this wave. And then he's just going. You know, he doesn't even think twice. Whereas like other junglers are like, do I need to go to that? Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe you could push it in alone and then something ends up happening and the game becomes tragic. Like, he controls the entire game. That's super fucking important. And here's the other thing. Obviously, people make fun of his like Lee Sin and his Nidalee. His mechanics are actually not that bad. Like, his mechanics are pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's fine mechanically. He's pretty good mechanically still. Jankos is just a fucking monster. Like, he's just really fucking good at the game. He doesn't have the attitude of somebody. Like, if you were to compare, like, I mean, the obvious comparison, because it was there for so many years, would be Selfmade. You compare, like, Selfmade's attitude and, like, that edge that Selfmade has, you would just think that Selfmade is better than Jankos. No, nowhere close right now. Nowhere close. I think Selfmade can be better in a certain meta on a certain team that's specifically around him. But if you're plug and playing into different teams, like, Jankos is going to be the better player like 9 times out of 10.
Here's the analogy for you. You know how, Dom, if you ever go on like Instagram, there'll always be really beautiful women, including in esports, where they obviously look really amazing. So the whole meme is that they make fun, like they always purposely post a picture of themselves looking terrible, like doing a really silly, like a dirt face, like,
oh no, this one again.
You know when they do that. But the premise goes, you only do that if you're good looking. That's the premise of what Jankos is doing, you idiots. The reason he's fine with you all memeing and going, wow, I missed another spear, it's because the joke is actually, the reason that's funny is because he's actually really fucking good. And he very rarely is actually bad. Like, the other thing about Jankos to me is this. I'll agree with, look, if you remember at the beginning of his career, he was like a mechanical fucking leasing boss, etc. Like, listen, he's not doing that very often. But like, I'd just go the other way. How often do you ever see him mechanically fail in a game? Like, he's one of those people that reminds me of, it's a bit like, I always thought Diamond Prox was like this. It's like, you don't even notice mechanics as a factor for them. They just can execute everything they want to do. And because they're so smart, they never need to have, like, they don't have to do like 27 outplays in a game. They're just in the right position ahead of time. They make the right thing. They execute all their spells. They correctly kite or whatever. They get in, they get out. Like, they just know what they're doing at the role. It's actually a role where I have to say, as much as like it's going to hurt people's feelings because everyone loves pop-off junglers, it's really not that important that your jungler can pop off. If you notice, most of the times where it's like the jungler must pop off, that means the rest of the team's fucked. That means, you know, like, it's like we don't have any laners that can win us the game. Like, Jankos plays exactly how you'd want him to play if he had a top team. The problem is this, Dom. If we now put it to the playoffs, I also don't think G2 can win the league. And the reason why is this. Because look, even if they get lucky and somehow Rogue collapses, that doesn't even mean they'll beat Rogue. And I don't think they'll beat Fnatic if they play Fnatic. So my problem is this. I actually think they have so many factors going for them that with Vitality's collapse and then the fact that Excel's a bit up and down. Listen, there's a world where I could see them coming third. I actually think probably that would be my prediction, that they will come third. But I don't think they'll be in the final. I don't think they will win personally.
Yeah. And then on the point that you said earlier, like I agree with all that. But on the point you said earlier about like, you know, the fact that he doesn't really play into like all the stuff he does well, I think that it's also things that like the community as a whole would not really understand, and it would just come off as him being like really fucking defensive. If he tried to get into like, actually, like, you know, this spear like wasn't that bad to throw because like it's just a free spear. Like you can just miss a spear here. It doesn't matter. A lot of people wouldn't throw this spear. I just throw it because there's actually no downside to it. Or if he just talks about what he does in game, like the reason why he's not super fucking far ahead and carrying the game is because like he actually has to go bot and crash this wave, and it's actually more important that he does that than get his Gromp and his Wolves. Like all the finer points of the game, he does so well, and they're most things that people don't even begin to consider. There's almost no point of him trying to like prove to the community that he's actually fucking good. Like,
also, why bother? Why give lessons out for free? Just even let the opposing jungler think, yeah, I'm just an idiot. I missed a spear. That's why you won the game. Yeah, that's why, son. Yeah, you won because I missed that spear. Like, fuck off, mate. Like, you probably won for some other reason completely. Yeah. Okay, what about this then? Yeah, go on. Do you have a foul point on that?
No, just the one thing I would say is like, just imagine being somebody who's playing against Selfmade, like, or playing against Jankos. Like, imagine being Selfmade in that game. This game that we were discussing from Vitality and G2, where you want to be able to use your mechanical advantage over the guy. Like, Selfmade is still a better mechanical player than Jankos, and you want to be able to use that. But then the game is so fucked because you're getting invaded. They didn't even know they were invaded. He went to his top side. Selfmade had 2 points Q. He didn't even have a point of his E. He can't even gank on Hecarim because he's playing to full clear, and suddenly his whole top side is gone. It's like, oh, this fucker took my camps. And then like the whole game is just so fucked. You never actually get into a place where you're comfortable because the whole thing starts being it's you just start from super far behind. So I don't know, man. Like, these are the types of things that just make Jankos great in my eyes. Like, he's just really insane player. But yeah, we can go to the next point.
Right. So obviously, XL is the next destination. We have to discuss this team, right? It sounded from what we were talking about earlier, you're sort of a little bit in my camp, which is, it's like, at first, I'll be frank, when Mickey X first joined, I actually did kind of like you. It reminded me of the famous example where Vitality recruited Crown Shot, and they were like, it's for the veteran shot calling or whatever, and you're like, he's not even doing any of that. We talk, like, you watch the games, you're losing the same exact way. You're like, listen, that PR at least didn't work. I mean, it might indeed be a better player on the side grade or whatever, but that angle is whack, right? I thought the same thing, but then I will say, not only has the team won more games, but I actually do think they're also another team which in the last few weeks, they started to look a bit better in some of the games. Yes, listen, they obviously still themselves like sort of took it a bit too fucking long to get locked in for playoffs, but I'm sure some of that was just in their head. Like, that was the whole fucking storyline. Like, it's almost impossible to not make playoffs. Almost. And then it's like you're just waiting like, oh, fuck, what's going to happen? That's going to be a gap. But once they were past that, all in all, the problem they have is this. They're another team where it's like they've got some things going for them, but like as an all-around team, it is a very flawed squad.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they didn't have a really convincing week. I mean, what did they do? They beat XL, lost to Fnatic, lost to G2, lost to Rogue recently.
Beat G2, you meant, yeah. You said XL, but you meant G2, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They
yes.
XL lost to G2.
They lost to G2. Yeah, that's right.
So, I mean, like, what have they done recently? So they beat, okay, so let's see. In the last 3 weeks, let's go through all their games. They lost to Misfits, beat Astralis, beat Mad, lost to Rogue, lost to G2, beat SK, and then lost to Fnatic. So they just lose to teams that are better than them and then beat teams that are worse than them, which I think is like fine. That's good. That's good. But they seem like the classic fifth, sixth place team.
Gatekeeper. Yeah, playoff gatekeeper.
They're a playoff gatekeeper. They're better than the bad teams. They're worse than the good teams. I mean, look, they might be better than Vitality. XL might be better than Vitality. Like, I think
here's their problem, Dom. Their problem is this. Their wins have aged like fucking milk because their wins were like Mad Lions and Vitality. So listen, if you go back a few weeks, mate, winning beating Vitality still had some charm. Now it's like, yeah, but we no longer think they're a really good team, so who gives a fuck? So what we've sort of done, unfortunately, is we've retroactively taken those Mad Lions and Vitality wins, and it's like, who cares now? You know, sorry, we don't care anymore. That's just the way it has to be. Look how those teams ended up, boys. Yeah, the stock went down, essentially. The stock went down. What do you want?
I mean, I guess at the end of it, it's what, a 5-4 final round robin, but they're just not. They're just not anything special. I mean, they might be Vitality. Like that's as far as I can go. I mean, look, they are 2-0 versus Vitality, right? So, shit, maybe they have Vitality's number, but I just don't really see them peaking higher than that. It's like I think they lose to whoever comes out of the top side of the bracket.
Yes,
whoever
no
they end
up
playing against, they're just going to get like 3-0, 3-1, something like that. But I will say Mickey looked pretty good. I think Mickey was a solid individual player. I don't think anyone doubted that he's a better player right now than Advian. I don't think that was what the argument was at all. I mean, the issue was always that the way that they phrased it seemed like they had no idea what player they were getting. But I do think Mickey delivered, and he showed that he is like a really good support player. So I think it was good for Mickey. I think it was really good for Mickey, and XL made playoffs, so I guess it was good for them too.
Oh, the joke is, mate, they essentially in the press release should have just said, look, we had a chance to get Mickey X, he's won 4 LEC titles, so that's it, that we did it. That's it. If you say that, first of all, it's honest, and secondly, hard to disagree with. Yeah, I agree, though. It's just the way they framed it. Like, they did that thing that everyone does in fucking esports, which is like, I'm going to sell you that this thing I'm doing is for a reason that's really good, and we can all agree upon should be done, right? Whether it is or not, I'm just going to do that. It's like, but you don't have to manipulate me. Just fucking say what your reasoning is, and then we'll let, if people agree, they agree. If they disagree, they disagree. So one thing I will say about this squad, though, is I do think the biggest problem they have going into the playoffs now is this. As we've basically pointed out, they basically made their living beating either the bad teams or the teams that now have joined the bad teams / are the worst teams in the playoffs. So realistically, I already thought the problem this squad had was, like, they have an identity. Of all the teams, I'll give them a credit. I think they do have an identity. The problem is the roster just isn't good enough. This team can't beat the top teams. Like, think about which lane's it going to come from, dude. Right, Finn. Listen, top lane ain't the strongest at the moment in LEC, but he ain't going to make it in the playoffs, I'm sorry. Then you go to Nuke Duck. I'm a big Nuke Duck fan. This ain't his best split. It's just having a good split or an all right split. He isn't a monster. He isn't a superstar mid laner right now. Then you go down to the bot lane, right? Patrick has been good, but mate, isn't he just in the Neon category we just discussed? If I just ban Jinx against him every series, he becomes half as fucking dangerous. Dude, he even had a game where he won because he did like a Jinx pop-off. Like, mate, this team, unfortunately, you can sort of... I think when they get to playoff series, you can pick them apart. And the top teams will, if they play them.
Yep. 100% agree. I think that they, but I mean, look, it's one of those things like with Misfits where I feel like if they win one playoff series, if they beat Vitality, I think that's already like massive.
That's a win, yeah.
Overperformance, right?
Yeah.
That's the situation. Like, this is XL. If XL ends like a solid fifth, like a clear fifth, they're better than 5 teams in LEC. Holy shit. Like,
yeah, that's good.
That's the best split in the history of XL by far. Like,
that's a pretty good storyline, even if you are the aforementioned fucking young buck as well. Because think about it, if you take a team with this players, you finish above Perks, Fari, Kazi, like mate, you killed it. You're fucking killing this coaching gig. What more can people ask? Like at the end of the day, you didn't have the team to go to top 3, mate. Like just coming 5th would actually be. I agree with that. I think that would be a good split. You have to just go right. Good. By the way, if you're XL as well, you just go perfect, good split, 5th on to summer. See if we can improve in summer. That's all you do. You take the win. You take the win.
Yeah, the other person I would want to shout out is Nelson, because I feel like this team...
Yes, that's true.
Like, that is another part of the coaching staff that they added, and it feels like XL got disciplined. Like, they look like they play the game a lot better now than they have in previous splits. It looks like, just from a mindset point of view, this team actually knows how to win games of League of Legends. They just don't have the players to beat the top teams. I think they might have a better grasp on how to win league games than G2, for example. Like, it seems like they are actually more disciplined when they're ahead. They make better decisions when they're ahead than G2. The problem is that they just don't really get ahead often because they don't have skill gaps in lanes.
I agree. That's actually part that's probably missed, because I think you've nailed it there. Because they're not ahead often, Dom, I actually think it makes them not look like... I think generally when they're in the winning position, they're pretty decisive, actually. I even see in like team fights, they feel like that's one of the areas I did feel like the Mickey X move worked. Like, his engage just fucking... This guy knows how to fucking engage team fights. Like, if you set up a dragon fight and he has an engage champ, he's going to find the angle. Like, he's a fucking smart player. So you see them as a team, they can look really decisive, but as you say, like, think about it. If you're behind in a game, you can't be super duper decisive and make it the winning play. You haven't got the winning play yet, you're behind. So I think that's the only issue for me, is like raw roster strength. They just don't have like a position they don't have a Vethio, unfortunately, you know.
Yep. Yeah, they don't have anyone that's super special. I think that, you know, I think that's fine also for XL. Like, if I was part of this organization, I think I'd be done trying to like find the next Caps or some shit. Yeah. You know, like they've won with enough rookie players. They've tried enough things. Like, I think now they need to be... It's going to sound fucked up, but hopefully people know what I'm going for here. They need to like be a good version of Astralis, you know, like Astralis with better players, where they actually have a game plan, they actually play well together, and they don't need the superstars everywhere. So, yeah, I mean, I think we've beaten the XL to death, but the XL topic to death. But yeah, I mean, like we said, it is already a successful split for them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Right, what we'll do is this then. To end the episode, we mainly previewed the 6 playoff teams, obviously. But let's just give like the sort of final conclusions to the teams that didn't make the playoffs. And then obviously we won't be talking about them for till summer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
Right, let's start, though, with the team that... Here's the thing, right? I actually don't want to start with Mad Lions, even though they finished all the... I think, actually, the first thing we should start with is SK, mate, because I have to say, always you have to judge teams like we just did with XL in the context of, like, what are your expectations? What quality players can you access? Who's coaching the team? Right, I actually think, all things considered, dude, I'd actually be reasonably happy with this SK split. Like, I think they've won way more games than I thought they were. They're stealing games left and right. There's players I never rated. Like, I look at the roster on paper, I'm still like, dude, this could be the last place team. They'd be way better than I expected. So I have to give them props. I actually think they've done half decent this split, mate.
Yeah, definitely. And like going into it, it might not seem like that much of an overperformance because, like, for example, I think mainly people had them bottom 2 with Astralis, so they only technically finished 8th and not 9th, but finishing with 7 wins is actually pretty insane considering the roster of players that they had. And then also you have to think about how they finished, right? Like their last 9 games, they were 5-4. They were winning most of their games towards the end here. They actually looked like a pretty dangerous team. Look, if SK had to play versus Vitality for the last playoff spot,
that would be interesting. That would be an interesting BO1.
Lose that.
Oh, absolutely. I could even see it.
Yeah. So I mean, it's just one of those things where if you look at how little you could expect that SK was spending, when you look at this roster, you can't imagine it being super expensive. Like, who could they have possibly spent money on in this roster? And then you look at their results. Think about what, like, one player on Vitality might be worth what the entire SK roster is worth.
That's true. Yeah.
And they have two less wins. SK has 2 less wins than Vitality, where a player like Alfaria Perks could literally be worth as much as the entire fucking roster. So, I mean, I think it's pretty good. 7-11. 7-11 is not bad. I mean, I think we've had splits where like 8-10 has been playoffs before.
Yes,
so.
8 wins usually as your borderline, if not the worst playoff team. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, look, I think SK, even though we shit on them quite a bit earlier in the season, I think overall it's an overperformance.
No, the thing about SK in general, if you think of the last few years of splits, is like they're the team that nearly always overperform relative to the roster on paper. Like, first of all, they've had some very lackluster rosters that they've even just changed pieces in constantly. They always get players no one gives a fuck about. Like, they're not the most touted ERL players. But every single time, they're always like low playoffs, borderline playoffs, win more games than they should, upsets all over the place. Like, it's actually even fitting, by the way, that Gilius plays for them now. He's also obviously like a fucking upset merchant. If you make him the underdog in the game, he just pulls them out of nowhere, doesn't he? He just gets those wins every time you think he's dead. He's not fucking... You have to stake the fucking heart and cut off the head or something with Gilius, don't you? He's always going to fucking steal a game somehow. Every time everyone decides he's shit, he actually starts winning games again.
Yeah, he always finds a way to like be useful. Even like this was a pretty bad... Like if you look at the overall split, I think that Gilius had a pretty bad split. I think he's probably bottom 2 junglers in the split overall if you look at the entire thing, because I think his first 9 were just so bad. But he normally finds out a way to win. And like this, he was one of the first people. I think he was the first person to pull out the Hecarim. Like, and people like he found a meta that was good for him. Hecarim, Volibear, and he was able to be useful and get his team some wins. And then once those picks become more dangerous, then when he plays the odd Lee Sin game or something like that, it's not like he's super far behind or it's like, oh shit, like, you know, he's somebody that is completely useless. Like, he's able to have a good performance because there's jungle resources and he's able to pick it at more times where it makes sense for the team comp rather than just picking it because he thinks that it's strong or whatever. So I think that I think that Gilius pulled it together by the end. It's just tough because, like, was it good enough where you'd say that Gilius belongs like in LEC going forward?
The problem is, I think his experience means, like, maybe he does. Like, if he's on the... Like, here's the problem I have with Gilius. In my opinion, he's one of those weird players who's in the no man's land where he only ever gets overrated or underrated. As in, like, when he does the Miracle Run with Schalke, probably gets overrated then, because then people were genuinely saying, like, you know, maybe he should join a top team or whatever. My problem with Gilius is, in my opinion, he's a mid-table jungler, but he can do that job. At the moment, he's probably in a team that's worse than he should have been for his history. Like, obviously, he probably should be. I would say he should be like. Put it this way, I wouldn't hate it if he'd have been signed to Misfits or something. That would have been an all right attempt at, a gamble on the jungle position. So that's my problem. Is I always think he's not actually like an elite jungler, but he's not trash. Like, I agree, this was a bad split overall. Didn't have great teammates, to be fair, but this wasn't a great one. But if anything, I thought this was an underperformance, this split.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question then would be, it's like when you have ERL junglers coming like Synkrov and Schlatten and like these guys that are coming into the LEC, like.
Oh, his days are numbered. Let's be real, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like that's the damn. Is
just true, isn't it? I mean, it's sort of true, though, isn't it? Like, if it's not them, it's going to be someone else. Whoever the next years are going to replace him, aren't they? It's just going to happen.
Yeah, probably.
And he's even got that problem, dude. This is why, also, remember, some top big names won't join the worst LEC teams. Because the logic goes, would you rather look like this, semi-shit on one of the worst LEC teams, or would you rather Smurf on a top ERL team? The problem is, right now, Smurf on the top ERL team is going to get you Gilius' job next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
It's the reality of the industry, unfortunately, isn't it? Right. Also, by the way, look, I don't have too much on SK. I will just say I no longer give a fuck about pentakills meaning anything after Jezu got one. So that's enough of that. Let's move on with that. I always thought because Reckless had too many of them, it must be an overrated stat. But now I know for sure it is because that just fucking means nothing, does it? So let's move on from that. Right now, let's go to BDS because here's the saddest thing of all. Right, I know some people were a little bit sort of prickly that Grabs sort of like flamed his own team publicly of like the idea that maybe they weren't committed or serious enough and weren't taking, maybe they weren't getting the most out of scrims or whatever. Dude, I actually think that was exactly the right move because the team I've seen in BDS this split looks like the coaching staff did everything they could, mate. They set them up in positions where like they at least had a game plan. Some of the drafts were even creative or actually looked like they could work. The team itself, though, fucking hell. Like, mate, Synkrov is in fucking jungle hell. Beyond that, who's even good on this team? Anyone? Anyone? Beulah? What is this shit? Like, if you're Grabs and Synkrov, you couldn't have done anything with this team. This is about the best you could hope for, I think.
Yeah, I think it's pretty tough with this team. There was no one that I was actually like happy with their performance with outside of Synkrov. I think everyone underperformed.
It's even gotten boring as shit on Adam. Like, we've just done it too much. He's just been too bad. He's consistently too bad. It's not fun anymore. Yeah, it's become like the TSM shit. It's not fun to just flame them. They have to give some signs of life or we are just kicking a corpse at the end of the day. Like, it's bullshit eventually, isn't it? Like, we've got to get bored of that, surely.
I mean, that's what I've done with TSM. I think I've unironically become a TSM fan at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like hard for me to see them lose so much. It's like they got to win a couple games for me to actually start believing in anything. But I mean, BDS, it's like I don't know. Do you retain this lineup? What did they win in the last half? Let me see something actually. Let me look at their fucking timeline. So yeah,
I feel like those wins must have been in the first half. Did they win any games towards the end?
They went 1-8 in the last half, with their only win, I believe, being over Astralis or some shit. It must have been Astralis.
I think I could be right, yeah.
Yeah, they only beat Astralis in the last half. They went 1-8 with only beating Astralis. How fucking bad is that? Like, this roster, like, what happened to the strengths of the roster?
I will just say though, that's how bad Astralis is though. This team went 1-8, still above Astralis.
I don't know.
Whatever, I know.
I think Astralis was actually a better team. Put it this way, even though Astralis technically, I mean, literally did win less games, Dom. The difference is this. BDS just consistently fucked up most of the games they were in. Astralis either had no chance or actually could win games. Like, they actually had, like, like SK, Astralis had, like, a perverse ability to just win games when they shouldn't and they were massive underdogs. BDS never had that, dude. That's the one thing that sucked about it. Like, in theory, by the way, this should be the team, if the way the GMs currently operate is correct, this should be the team, rather than SK or Astralis, that gets all the upset wins, because this is all this fresh potential, top ERL talents. Like, I'm trying an experimental lineup. Like, it hasn't worked, boys. It not only hasn't worked, it's like I said about the thing where I basically already gave credit to Synkrov. Almost everything else on the team has fallen apart or looked really bad. Yeah, it's been rough. And then, like, think about it like this: Astralis was 0-9 in the first half. They didn't win a game. In the second half, they were 3-6, where BDS was 1-8. So, like, their trajectory, the Astralis trajectory, at least it looks positive. It's like, oh shit, it's going up. Like,
oh, do you know something mad, dude? This will make you sad. In the last 4 weeks, Let me see. Astralis won as many games as Mad Lions.
Wait.
The last 4 weeks, Astralis won as many games as Mad Lions.
What does that mean? Because
over the last 4 weeks of the split, Astralis won 3 games. So did Mad Lions.
Oh, Astralis. I was thinking BDS for example.
No. Oh, sorry. Yes, I was just saying it because you mentioned Astralis being better than you expect.
Yeah. No,
that's crazy when I think about that now. Holy fuck.
Yeah. Well,
Holy shit.
I mean, Mad Lions didn't win a game in the second half of the split until this final week. They won all their games now, but they hadn't won a game in weeks 5, 6, and 7. So, yeah, that's crazy to think about. But just when I'm looking at BDS just in general, like, I don't know, man. I don't know how you don't make changes. How do you not make changes with this roster going forward? I mean, they look like they actually can't win games. Like, they don't know how to win a game when they have leads. Like,
here's what I'm worried about, dude. Here's what scares me. I actually think this is where I'll be very interested to see if Grabs has like input on this. Right, I'm scared that BDS will think that from last year, it's like, no, but the lesson we learned from Deficio and Misfits is just keep the roster and give them another chance in summer and they will all like improve. It's like, mate, as you've now seen with Vethio, that was a fucking lightning in a bottle, that fucking split. And in fact, guess what? Even what he got in that split, in that summer split, didn't hold over. Here it fucking disappeared completely. He ended up not even having the same bot lane anyway, and he lost his jungler. So, like, if I was them, put it this way, this would be the team of all the teams in the bottom, right? I personally think SK and Astralis very cynically run and just don't spend money or try to get big names. So I don't expect them to make big roster moves. The difference is this, Dom. If they really wanted to in BDS, not only do they have the money, but I believe they could get players tomorrow and replace these guys and have a chance in summer. I just am worried that they'll like double down on having all the rookies and just like fucking just take the same roster. And if they do that, I don't see it being the Misfits turnaround. I think they're just bad again, unfortunately, would be my guess.
Yeah, I just don't see the improvement, right? Like,
I could see Adam being a little bit better, but aside from that, where are we going to get something from in this team, you know?
Adam was really hard to judge, honestly, because it felt like the whole thing that he did was he was actually like pretty good at laning on his champions, and he would like get his leads. His champions were weird or whatever, but he would get his leads and then he would end up being able to like do something with it later on. Like he would roam mid or something, and then even though his like mid to late game wasn't good, like he would actually affect the map. He would fuck up the game somehow. He would follow a TP call or something, you know, like at least his early game was good. Now it feels like because he's had so many bad games, and I like, you know, he obviously had the Aurelia incident where he died twice to BB level 1 and all this shit. Like, he's had like all these like really awful games. I feel like he's lost some of like the fire, some of the stuff that made him like kind of special in the first split. Like, where's the ability for him to just like dick other people in lane super hard? Like, when did we see that? When are we seeing him dick these like shit? I mean, like, he used to be the counter to Wonder, right? Wasn't that his thing? He was the Wonder counter. He always played well against Wonder. I mean, I don't see it, right? Like, it just hasn't been there. So it's weird. I don't really know what to make of it. I feel like probably this is his first experience where he's getting like shit on by the community as a whole. Whereas up until then, it's just been an upward trajectory. You know, like he joined K-Corp, got a fucking ton of fans, joined Fnatic, had a way better like split than most people expected.
Of course, yeah.
Ended up going to Worlds, like played in a final. He played in the LEC final already.
Yeah,
and now when he's on a team where he's like, oh shit, like my team actually isn't good. Like, I actually have to play really well to win. It just seems like he's not responding to it that well. So it's interesting to see. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up better next split, but I mean, I think this split has to go as like pretty colossal failure for him. I think you could even make an argument that he was the worst top laner in LEC this split, even below White Knight and Gen X.
Yeah, overall. Oh, since you said it, we'll use this as a segue to talk about the last team, which is obviously Mad Lions, the team that did just miss out on the playoffs. Right, the thing with this team is, you said it yourself there, until the last week, in the second half, they were just winning no games at all. Right, if you look at this squad, this is one of those teams, you have this every single LCS LEC split in history. There's always the team that ends the split strong, there's always the team that starts the split strong. This was just the team that started the split a bit better. Like, after the first few weeks, this team's just been downhill consistently. Like, everything fell away. The whole Unforgiven narrative, he just quieted down by the end of the split. He was looking fucking mega the first half. Rika just never really got online the whole time. By the way, interestingly, I even saw, I think you might even have seen this, you know when they do what do you call it? That fucking pop quiz, that feature they do for LEC. You know, they just released one where it was people's expectations before the split began.
Yeah, a lot of people said he was going to be
Everyone said he was going to be the rookie of the split. Did you see that? Almost every single player had Rika. I think, like, I can't, like, let's say there was 20 people they asked. Like, 18 had Rika as it. Like, everyone was thinking this guy was going to be really good, it looked like. And, mate, it just hasn't happened. I'm not hating on him, by the way. I think it's a very complicated player. We've talked about it in the past episode. It isn't that he's bad. It's just that he's not a star player. And unfortunately, in this team, like, you just look at it and you just fucking... we're all that Wolverine meme with the fucking humanoid in the photo going, oh, shit, humanoid. Like, and especially now we're seeing him in Fnatic. Like, that's who we're missing. So the problem is, like, at the end of the split, I said this before, but this is the angle that I'm taking from this. This is why, if you're Mad Lions, you can't restock star positions every split. Like, you can have times you miss. You're only human. Then, secondly... It's all well and good being like, we're going to be balanced and all that. Like, that's great if you're a championship team. You do need to find like little edges to give people a break. If you're a team like Mad Lions is now, you just need to be on the grind, mate. You have to be in that fucking server, play as many games as you can. Like, this team's, it was a train wreck the last half of the split.
Yeah, it was a train wreck for sure. And I mean, I said this, I don't know if it was on a co-stream or maybe it was on the jungle or something, but one of the things that I noticed was that Mad Lions, it felt like they tried to completely reinvent their identity. And I guess my reasoning as to why they potentially did this is because they thought that if they just plugged in Reeker and had Reeker just play similarly to Humanoid, like this TF that they played, they won every single game, by the way, this last week with him on TF. If they just played this like, oh, you're just going to be Humanoid light, they're like, oh, we're never going to be as good as we were last split. Like, if we just try to be that same version, we're just going to be the same team, but just worse because instead of having Humanoid, we have Reeker. So they tried all this different stuff, but in the end of the day, like at the end of the day, they actually would have probably been a better team if they just used Reeker as a lighter version of Humanoid and they kept everyone else's strength, because where's the Xin Zhao? Where's Leona? Where are all the Mad Lions picks that you'd assume that they would play a lot the split? They just weren't here the entire time. And I mean, Reeker actually looked a lot better when he was playing TF and he has more agency than then when he was just like playing a different champion every game, where it's like, oh, he's playing an Ahri game with a Pyke and Kaiser's kind of running it down. I think the other thing is when Kaiser and Elyoya are so much less stable, I think it gives the rookies a harder time to improve. I don't think that that's the environment where the rookies are going to improve at the best pace, because they're not trying to like match, like they don't really know what they're supposed to do because every fucking game is different.
Yes.
And like they don't know what their teammates are even good at. Like Unforgiven and Reeker, they didn't get to experience what that Mad Lions last year was like how that actually felt to play with those players. So I think that it kind of stunted their growth a little bit. So, I mean, now they have a choice, right? Like, there's obviously people that everyone can look at Niski and be like, this guy was pretty fucking good. Like, he was clearly a top mid in LEC last year. Still playing the game a fuck ton. Still super high rated in solo queue. There's no reason to believe that if you plug Niski into Mad Lions would not be immediately a better team.
No, I'm with you on that. I think we discussed it last episode. That's just a slam dunk move, isn't it? Especially because, as you said as well, like, think of Niski's style of play. Dude, he didn't instantly fix this jungle support. Or at least he's the best possible band-aid that's available, at least, for fuck's sake.
Definitely. So the question is, are you going to go for a Niski, or are you going to actually double down? Because now you have the results. You have the hard results of, like, we didn't make playoffs with this lineup.
What would you predict?
Like
let me ask you, what would you... Obviously, I'm not saying what would you do. I'm asking, what do you think Mac would do? Do you think he sticks with Rika? Do you think he goes for one of these players that's available to bring in last minute? What do you think you do?
What do I think Mac will do? I think he'll stick with Reeker, personally.
That's my vibe as well.
He seems like that type of guy where he'll, like, because the thing is also, like, I feel like Mac's the type of coach where he'll be, like, very self-reflective, and he's the type of guy that will also take blame, and maybe he'll reflect on the situation and be like, you know what, maybe I didn't put Reeker in the best situation to improve. What if I do things differently? Can Reeker really, like, play better? That's the vibe I get from Mac, but I could be wrong. I mean, we've had him on one episode of the Crackdown. That was the only time I've ever talked to him. No,
I have a similar vibe. Yeah. Like, I get the sense of, like, I also think as well, when you've been as vocal as he has about, like, not putting pressure on players' mental health, like, I think essentially it's going to look pretty bad if you check a lad this motherfucker and just bring him up and go, here's the starting spot, and then go, actually, you suck. So even if you can get better, it ain't going to be with us. Goodbye. Don't call us. We'll call you. Like, that'd be pretty. That would be, in my opinion, like anathema to what seems to be Mac's like philosophy on League. Like, if anything, he is the ultimate coach to double down. And as you say, it's actually it's a gift and a curse of leaders, I've noticed, is great leaders, because they take responsibility for the loss. I've seen this a lot with actually like in-game leaders in Counter-Strike, Dom. You have leaders where even if like they were like a friend of mine and I was like, dude, you've got to cut this player, like he's holding you back, they would always be like what you're talking about. They'd be like, yeah, but I think some of it's on me though. Like if I can find a way to integrate him better, or like maybe like I need to like tweak a little bit what I'm doing, like maybe I haven't like explained to him what he need to. The premise goes, because they're a good leader, they try everything themselves before they actually write you off. The problem with that is, that's why I say it's like a curse and a gift. That can be really good. Like you can imagine it's going to make you like maximize all areas of your team. The problem is if you ever get a player who just won't be able to make that jump up no matter what you do, you might spin your wheels a bit like too long and you might waste like half a split on it. Or in this case, you might just blow someone gambling that he gets it together.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm not 100% sure that Rieger could not improve. You know, like I think that it was a tough split for him. But I don't think that he was really equipped to like deal with it. Like I do think that there is some truth in the fact that Mac could have done things differently. The team could have played differently to enable Rieger to improve it at a faster rate.
What you said earlier, by the way, I want to ask that actually. Do you think essentially that Mac coached this team like a global meta style? Like this is just what's strong in the champions at the moment. Here's the newest like you were making it sound like you wanted him to kind of like strip it down and have like simple, like here's the couple of champions I want you to play in. Here's like in that case of Rika, like you're just going to play a lot of like TF, play like Humanoid. Do you think he essentially didn't go to the Band-Aid approach?
I think he went too hard on trying to like be the best team overall, and he didn't like build it up the right way. I think he kind of made the grabs mistake a little bit from last year, where he wasn't putting his players in the best, like not being realistic with what was happening. Like at some point, I feel like you need to actually find some like baseline success on the stuff that is strong in the meta. So if anything, I think it was the other way around, where I would have wanted to see him become more of like a meta slave, because that's actually what I think Elyoya's biggest strength was. I never felt like Elyoya was picking random champions. I felt like his entire champion pool before was strictly meta, but he played the meta better than anyone else. I thought that that's who he was last year. And I think that Kaiser is definitely better on Engage than anything else. I think from watching his games.
Oh, noticeably so, yeah.
Very obvious he's better on Engage than anything else. He just finds the angle. He knows which people...
Dude, he should for real be on... I think I said this on the last one, but I'll say it again. He should be on that Hylissang treatment from a few years ago, where it's like, it doesn't even matter if Pike and Thresh are in the meta. If you want to pick it now. Yeah, no matter what the meta is. Because you're just that good on it, aren't you? Exactly.
Yeah, except for him, instead of Pike and Thresh, it's like Leona.
It'd be like Leona or something.
Yeah. So I just think that they didn't actually think that this was a possibility. There's like no way that we're just going to end up being not a playoff team if we go with this approach. And then once that became the reality, I think it was too late. It's like week 5, week 6, and they're like, shit, wait, we actually are just bad now. Oh, fuck, what are we going to do? And then they weren't able to get it together in the last like couple weeks. I think that week 7 was probably the most egregious to me. I believe that was like the RE Pike one, where it was like, this is what you're going to go out on. You're not going to go out on the picks you played. You're not going to go out on this super week you just showed us. They could have done this week earlier in my mind. That's where I wanted to see them. I wanted to see that be the response when their backs were against the wall, not still be like the weird team. I wanted to see it earlier. Also, like when you look at Rieger, it's like he had to play so many different styles and so many different champions. It's like that's pretty fucking hard for a rookie. Like he wasn't just sitting there like what I mean. They were playing Victor, then they were playing Rise comps, then they're playing TF, then they're playing Ari. Like they're playing like and Yasuo. They're playing all these different champions that are just like. They're not really similar in identity.
No.
I think that's really hard as a rookie.
For sure. So, dude, you better be like Perks or Faker to play a champion pool like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, I mean, that's my take. I wouldn't be mad at them if they kept Rieger. I would just, it would be just one of those things where it's like, you know what? You guys have enough. You've had enough success as a coach, as a staff, as an organization, that you like get the pass. It's like you do whatever you think is right. We're not in the team, right? Like I'll trust you on it. You do whatever you think is right. But at the end, if it's still similar results, then you will.
Oh, we have to flame you if you fail some, of course, yeah. No, I agree. My premise goes like this. Look, I would say overall, like, if you can get this guy, I would do it tomorrow. I just think that's a slam dunk move. But I sort of agree, as in, I don't think, like, if you notice, I always contextualise it. I just don't think Riku was doing more than he did. That's my problem. It wasn't that he didn't do it. He was terrible and entered the games. He actually didn't enter many games, I'd say. Fair play for in that regard as a rookie. Here's the issue, though, is if you keep Rika, then in my opinion, the whole focus in this fucking mid-season period is you better get the El Yoya thing fixed. Because like you're saying, I think it's more identity with Kaiser, but like El Yoya, even when he played some of his champions, it's like, dude, you just look like a different player from last year. This is where people also, like, remember, that guy for me is still sort of a rookie. He's only on, like, he's just finished his third split ever. That's not as much League of Legends as people think. He wasn't someone who'd played tons of League of Legends before he came to LEC, remember? So to me, I think people took for granted that he was like, he'd mastered the game last split because he looked amazing. Like, you've actually seen now, sometimes he maybe didn't know what he was doing at times. Like, he just looked a bit lost. Like, he was going for the same champions. He was trying to make plays. He was trying to make, like, fucking out players. It just didn't work, and I think without Humanoid, like, the structure of the team did collapse a little bit in.
Yeah, and one thing that I hope that they do going forward is that they don't think of themselves like a championship team from 2021. Yes, exactly. I think it's useless. I want them to have I want them to remember this year and just view it as like, this team started this year. We were a seventh place, not playoff team in spring. How are we going to try to make the playoffs and try to go to Worlds? Like, that should be your focus. Trying to make the playoffs, trying to go to Worlds. That's your entire thing. And I want them to approach the game like they are learning things for the first time with this roster, because realistically, if everything that's said about Humanoid is correct, like, that is what it is. Like, he was a huge part of the team. So I want to see them just embrace the new, the team that they are now and not think about who they were a year ago.
Right, I think that'll be it. Because here's the thing. I'll give everyone a spoiler. I'll make this part of the outro thing, basically. What we're going to do is this. Since there are 2 weeks now until the actual playoffs, what I actually wanted to do explicitly was intentionally split it up. I wanted us to do it like this. So even though we did, like, go through the 6 playoff teams in the context of if they were in the playoffs and who they play, like, we're obviously so far away, no one really knows how it's going to play. These are like initial thoughts at the end of the split. We'll do an episode before the playoffs begins, and I'll probably even bring a guest for that one. And the idea then is we'll go super deep on the literal matchups and the literal backer, and we'll try and make like an interesting convo that's different from this one. This was more like, high resolution surface topics. So obviously people say it's interesting detail in the LEC, right? If you're not first, you may as well be last. Oh, sorry, that's TSM. Oh, fuck, my bad. But actually, this was the last thing I'm going to say on this episode.